Welcome back for another episode of the Silver and Blue Podcast, episode 21. And this is our first post-game podcast. We are currently live on our Cowboys News 365 Twitter page and our YouTube page. And if you didn't get to listen to it live, you're listening to this as a podcast on wherever you can get your podcast for the Silver and Blue Podcast. Corey, joining me as always, my co-host. And we are joined by a very special guest, Dan Ruppert. How are you doing tonight, Dan?
Good. For clarity, it's Rupert, as in the old Yankees owner. Yeah, as in the old Yankees owner, somewhere back in my family lineage. But
Perfect.
Dan Rupert.
Okay, well, let's get started. Last night was the season opener, Sunday Night Football against Tampa Bay, and it went probably like in every scenario you could play out in your head. That was probably the worst case scenario in several aspects. I mean, it was the worst case scenario before Dak got hurt, and then it somehow got worse. Let's start with the offense. Dak, that was one of the worst performances we've seen from Dak in his career, and I believe it held out in his PFF grade. I believe it was his second lowest grade in a game of his career. Dak wasn't good. That was awful. But he never had a chance in the first place. I mean, the offensive line was bad. Connor McGovern was hurt, I believe, in the first 6 or 7 plays. And the receivers, I don't have any words for what went on in the receiver room yesterday. I'll let you guys take over. I've been rambling a little bit, but there's a lot to go with what went wrong with the offense.
Yeah, look, CeeDee Lamb, I read he had about a 1.9 yard average cushion separation, right? And that's your number one wide receiver right there, right? Now, granted, the defense was double and triple teaming him. Why? Because, you have 192 total NFL receptions going into this game, right? And all but 39 were CeeDee Lamb, right? The other 39 were Noah Brown. There were only 11 touchdowns, 0 for everybody but CeeDee Lamb. So the Buccaneers knew you key on Lamb, keep Zeke in front of you, and just force the Cowboys to beat you, and they couldn't. The receivers couldn't get off lines. They weren't sitting in routes. They weren't sitting in pockets. It was just an absolute disaster. Now, this is before we even touched the offensive line. And so, one of the comments you saw was, why is Dak double pumping? Why is he double clutching? Well, part of that's because if your receiver isn't there, you're hoping that by throwing a pump or trying to clutch, you're hoping that defender bites on it and gives you separation, which did not happen. And so, look, Dak didn't play well. There were some bad decisions. Dak loves rhythm. They couldn't get into a rhythm. But there is a lot of issues before you get to Dak and say, Dak's the problem. And that's just kind of how I saw it. I think a lot of other people saw it the same way. But it is what it is. We saw it coming from the off-season into the preseason and then into a game. So this shouldn't have been a massive surprise. It's a little surprising that your third-round pick didn't play, that he was inactive. It's a little surprising some of the play calling. There wasn't a lot of motion. It was very rudimentary routes in a lot of ways. It left a lot to be desired, and we saw it on game day.
Yeah, I think I'll just start with the quarterback play. Like you guys both touched on, it was awful. I mean, before I even want to get to the receivers, I just think Dak's decision-making, what he was seeing out there, it didn't feel like everything was processing maybe as smoothly as he would have liked. So you definitely saw that in his performance. He, like you said, his second worst PFF grade in his career, which definitely the eye test would have told you that. And it was just disappointing. And it kind of goes back to, there's a conversation, throughout the preseason of, maybe the starters should play, maybe Dak should be out there. And they did nothing to silence those conversations last night with the way they came out as a whole, but especially at the quarterback position. Then you work your way to the receivers. CeeDee Lamb, first of all, I'm gonna go back to the decision to even make him the number one receiver to begin with, when we hadn't really seen anything that gave you hope or proof or something that told you he was actually ready for that commitment as a number one receiver. If you go back to the games last year when when Amari Cooper missed those 2 games, of course he got hurt and won the Kansas City game, but then the next game the offense was absolutely horrible with him out there as the number one receiver. So then what did Stephen Jones do? He goes out and makes him the number one receiver and doesn't bring anything else in that totally resembles an NFL wide receiver. And then you touch on the offensive line. I mean, it's just a complete disaster. I think Tyler Smith did put out like a glimmer of hope, and I think he played, decently well for his first NFL game going against Shaq Barrett. But that's really the only bright spot. The run game I felt was really good. I think Kellen Moore kind of went away from that pretty early. I felt like Zeke was, running strong, running good early in the game, and then for whatever reason, it didn't really continue that trend. But yeah, I mean, just when you talk about it in terms of the offense, I mean, that is the worst offensive performance I think we have seen from a Dallas Cowboys offense in quite a long time. And now, of course, we haven't even touched on the injury yet. Now you're without your starting quarterback, which is just going to make this thing even worse. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions that came out of this game before you even get to the injury talk. But the offense as a whole, I don't see it.
So with the receivers, this is why I was against getting rid of Amari Cooper, because you need, most good offenses in the league have at least 2 threats in their passing attack. And Dalton Schultz is, he's a fine tight end, but he's not a vertical threat. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper were so good together because their presence on the field would get each other better, more favorable coverage looks. And I'm sorry, Tampa Bay is not scared of Dennis Houston. Tampa Bay is not scared of Noah Brown. Like these, they have no one else besides CeeDee Lamb. And now, I will say, CD needs to be better. That was a very bad CD game. I believe he had 2 catches on 11 targets, and you almost take away those yards because on one of the targets he got an OPI that lost 10 yards. But I'm not throwing that all on CD and Dak needing to be better. Like this is roster building. And then Steven comes out today and he throws blame at everybody but himself. He throws some blame at McCarthy for, starters not getting reps together in the preseason. He blames CeeDee Lamb saying he needs to step up. Well, no. Yeah, CD needs to be better, but like those receivers you're running out there, you don't have a chance.
So I have a question. I do have a question. I just want to interject just real quick. So when we saw the offense at the second half of last year, who do you put that on when the personnel was better than it was last night? Because I think that's a big conversation as well that's being kind of overlooked, because this isn't necessarily anything different from what we saw in last year. So what would you guys say to that conversation?
So, I mean, if the rumors are true, let me start there. Okay. If the rumors are true, there was some influence by the front office to get away from what I have heard is trick plays, quote unquote, trick plays. And they felt that you needed to involve your running back more than they were, who was injured at the time. But if those rumors are true, which is not completely out of the realm of possibility, knowing this front office, okay,
Beasley said it.
Then ultimately, at the end of it all, it falls on the front office. Even if it was Kellen Moore and Mike McCarthy, even if the front office did not do anything to help themselves, right? In fact, if anything, they downgraded the offense this offseason. So we can point fingers and say it's Kellen Moore, which, by the way, just terrible route combinations, but that's a whole nother story. We can say it was Kellen Moore. We can say it was Mike McCarthy. But listen to when the Joneses speak off-season and during season. Off-season, they say, we're a unit. We make decisions together. Everybody's in on this decision. Oh, we're going to get this guy. We all decided on it. Who plays, how this plays, we all talk about it. But the second things went south, Steven immediately took the front office out of the equation. So if you're going to me, if you're going to point fingers, the first finger you have to point is the front office. Once you point it there, then we can start looking at Kellen Moore's offense, and we can look at Mike McCarthy's decision making, and we can look at, Will McClay's drafting, and we can look at all of the other things underneath of it. But that first finger has to be pointed at that front office to the CEO and COO. Straight up.
And that's the thing, all the fans can do all the crying and, complaining they want about, pointing the finger at the front office. But when you have a franchise that's run by ownership, there's no accountability. No one's holding their feet to the fire. They're always in the right. They can do what they want. Like, this doesn't happen for normal franchises. This is not like the owner's son running the team. That does not happen anywhere else around the league. Maybe that happens in another franchise, and I'm not aware of it. But when you sit back and think about it, it's patently insane. like it's just it's insane. And you sit here and we can have the Kellen Moore conversation at some point. But I've seen those rumors that you brought up earlier as well, and I believe them because there's one common denominator over these last several years, and it's them. It's the Jones boys. And your franchise is run by a guy. I think I was just in a Twitter space a little bit ago, and I was saying your franchise is run by a guy who is a chemical engineering major at Arkansas and has about as much football acumen as any of us, comparing his resume to any of the other GMs around the league.
Speaking of which, do you know who the cap specialist is for the Dallas Cowboys? We have one.
Enlighten me.
His name is Adam Prasifka, Prasifka.
Okay, I've heard this name, yes.
And he was an electrical engineer out of Arkansas, surprise, surprise, who was the equipment manager for the college team, was brought on around 2000-ish timeframe, and was brought on as the cap specialist. So you have a cap specialist who was a mechanical engineer by trade, now running your cap, right, for the last 2 decades. Now, if we look at the last 2 decades and how they've approached the salary cap, I think there's some also telling trends within that. So to your point, you don't have football people outside of maybe Will, you don't have football people in that front office.
I would love to get some truth, like just get Will McClay in a room and get some truth serum in him, and just I would love to hear what Will McClay has to say about how they run things. And it's just the same cycle over and over. We'll have a new scapegoat. The old scapegoat was Romo, it was Wade Phillips, it was this
Jason Garrett after 10 years.
Jason Garrett, Scott Linehan, and
go back to Campo.
Yeah, Campo. Yeah. Now it's Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore, and there's one common denominator, and it's not going to change. And
nope. And the number one reason why it's not going to change is because the money keeps rolling in, the fans keep rolling into the stadium, they keep buying merchandise. Fans can get on Twitter and all that and complain all they want to, but at the end of the day, every single year they're sipping the Kool-Aid that Jerry's putting out. He said last week in a radio interview, 1 + 1 = 3. He has to believe that. And, he sprinkles it around the fan base. And what do you know? The Cowboys are always in the headlines. The fans are always at the stadium. They're buying the merchandise. He has this great facility in Frisco that people enjoy, and it's not going to change. And that's the number one reason.
Yeah, I heard someone sum it up the other day. They said, a lot of teams are football minded that can market. We have a marketing firm running a football team.
Yes.
And look, to their credit, it's not like this team has been a 4-12 team for a decade, right? Let's put that. They have had some competitive years. They do enough sometimes, right? So, and they're the most valuable franchise. So it's not like everything is just this awful bleak future, right? But what it is now is, to your point, there is no accountability. There's nothing holding their feet to the fire outside of fans potentially at some point saying we're done. Somebody put out you can get Cowboys tickets to the Bengals for like $38 this week, right? So it's starting to slowly trickle, and now whether that makes an impact over time, who knows? But it goes into the idea of, until there is changes in the philosophy up at the top, and that money is not the key, but winning. When they realize winning will equate to more money, that's when we'll see change.
But here's the thing. I don't think it's going to change, because you know what? Coming into this season, in my opinion, I don't know how much Twitter is necessarily like a read on, the heartbeat of the fan base and how they're feeling. But this has been kind of like the most apathetic fans have been on it, like the entire offseason almost. And now just kicks it off even more with this season. But you know what? Forbes most valuable franchises came out a couple weeks ago. Dallas Cowboys #1. Last night, the ratings came out, most watched Sunday night opener in 6-7 years. And so, like, I don't think that philosophy is going to change, because that money is going to keep rolling in. And I'm of the opinion that I think it's going to get, when Jerry goes, whenever he goes, not to get morbid, but it's going to get worse whenever it's just Steven, because Steven knows that Steven's even, less risk averse than Jerry. Jerry's, any remote risk they take, I think, is driven by Jerry. It's going to get even worse here in the future. And it's just, you can say all you want about roster building and how they go about their business, but I think it might have been Mike White, Burgers and Blitzes on Cowboys Twitter yesterday. He put it perfectly. Maybe it was this morning, I don't know, but he said it's one thing like if you come up short and you do your thing, you make your draft picks, you spend your money. But what's going to piss me off is when you're not giving yourself the best possible chance to succeed. And that's what they've done with this roster, clearly. I mean, they actively downgraded at receiver. They actively downgraded at right tackle. And, you can have the Connor Williams, Tyler Smith conversation. I'm not going to lose too much sleep about Connor Williams. But like you look at what they did, and, they cut Amari Cooper. Okay, let's re-sign Michael Gallup. Okay, we're going to bring in a veteran, James Washington, to hold it down while Gallup works back. Okay, James Washington is hurt. We're not going to do anything. We like our guys. And the 3rd-round pick you drafted to replace Amari Cooper is in street clothes last night. So it's just, you could have this conversation, and we've had this conversation over and over for years and years, but it doesn't seem to change. We're going to cycle through, and there's going to be a new scapegoat. And at the end of the year, they're going to have the excuse to say, "Oh yeah, Dak got hurt. We'll run it back. Dak's healthy." It's the same cycle over and over, and we're just caught in it. And I know maybe we want to break down a little bit more of the game, but this is like a conversation that needs to be had.
It does, and it isn't. Look, Dallas Magazine had an article. I don't want to say about 6 years ago now. And there was a snippet. I've shared it on Twitter several times, where Stephen Jones actually talks about what's going to happen potentially when Jerry leaves.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And he specifically states that they're going to be more conservative than they are now, because Jerry is the one who takes all the risks for this team. Now, looking at the risks they have taken this year, just you're telling me it's going to get more conservative. Like you said it, right? So we have to look at it as that was your word. So, I mean, look, I would love Charlotte to run the team, if I'm going to be straight up and honest with you, but it's probably not going to happen. So what can you build upon? Like, how can this team build? And there's a couple small things. They have given up some control in the past. They did it with Jimmy. They did it with Bill, right? Look, I know people want Sean Payton, and there's a whole discussion about you're going to have to trade for him, and you're going to have to get permission to bring him in. There's a whole bunch of things that have to happen before that guy even sets foot at the Star. But somebody like him is potentially, they know him, they trust him. He's from a school that they love, the Parcells tree. If they're going to do something different, it will be in that vein. Now, I say different, we've seen this iteration before, but it's going to take something like that for a real change to happen. Now, there are some positives, right? Tyler Smith didn't play awful. Now, unfortunately, he was hit with a false start. It caused him to start delaying his reaction to the snap, right? Because he didn't want to get another false start. He was late coming out of his stance, which is what actually ended up leading to the Dak injury, right? Go back and watch it. That's he was late out of his stance. The guy got past him. That's who hit it. That whole thing happened, right? But ultimately, he played well enough. Okay, well enough. Your other issues is you don't have a left guard right now. Farniok was terrible,
Awful.
right? You still have questions at center, although Biotish played pretty okay. You still have Zach Martin, but look, Zach Martin, I love the guy, but how many more years do you really honestly have with him? You know, at best 5, 3, I don't know, right? You have an abysmal, the right tackle regressed, it appears, right? So you can fix that. You have Jason Peters coming, which means you can move Smith to guard, which should help your left side better. You still got to worry about the right tackle, but you have some things moving forward if you choose to use them. The bigger question is going to be wide receiver, right? Because at this point you got Will Fuller, who's pretty much done with football. You have OBJ, who's now already talking to the Rams, essentially. You know, you have Brown out there, but like, let's be honest, for whatever talent he has, there's a lot of things that come with him, right? We all know that. It just is. That's going to be where to look forward, you're going to have to figure that out. Can Gallup and Tolbert potentially coming in help? I don't know. I don't think so. But that's where the glimmer of hope is can you shore up that left side with those guys, get Gallup in, get Tolbert up to speed, and hopefully patch enough together until Dak comes back? I don't know. But if you're looking for hope on the offense, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the hope on the offense is pretty much bringing in external talent, which I don't know if that's the direction they're going to go. I mean, they've been completely against it all throughout training camp and, to start the season. And now without your quarterback, like, my personal take is, like, is it even worth it at this point? Like, that comes back in best case scenario 6 to 8 weeks. And, 6 weeks seems pretty optimistic. That's the optimistic view of it. Where are you going to be in 6 weeks potentially? Like, I mean, I know the schedule eases up after Cincinnati on Sunday, with a couple of Division East opponents, and then you got the Lions and Bears mixed in there as well. So, those are 4 winnable games you would think on paper, but without your quarterback, I don't know how winnable those games are, which puts you in a position where if the Cowboys are, for example, 2-6 when Dak is healthy enough to come back, yeah, it's probably not the end of the world, because I don't see anybody in the NFC East that's going to run away with the division per se, unless the Eagles, start out, 6-2, 7-1, something like that. Then you're behind the 8 ball, obviously. But I'm just at the point where I just don't know if it's even worth to bring in the talent. I mean, you just kind of roll what you got out there, like you have been, and kind of let the chips fall where they may.
Your shot at the division is more or less gone, in my opinion. I mean, just as bad as they looked with Dak, what the hell are they going to look like with Cooper Rush? Or, I saw people saying, "Oh, trade for Jimmy G." You think Jimmy G is going to be any better with Noah Brown as his wide receiver too? No, like it's not. No matter who you roll out there, it's not going to be better. Like Cooper Rush, I saw someone say, "Oh, what about Cam? Run 12% with Cam?" No, like it's not going to be any better. It's almost not worth it to bring in another guy. Like you're better off just taking your chances with Cooper Rush or Will Grier, whoever you think's better. Like it's just, there's not really a way out of this in terms of, and you like now, like I was saying, the shot at the division's basically gone. Your best chance is just, hope you can win 3, let's say maybe 3 games without Dak. Like I guess so you would be about 3-5 when he gets back, and hope you can sneak in a wild card spot at 10-7 or 9-8. But like even then, when Dak comes back, you're gonna be all right. We need you to be Superman. But we saw Russell Wilson come back from a hand injury last year, and he was not very good when he came back because he kind of rushed back a little bit. And I think it'll be more of the same. So their chances of even making the playoffs are more or less shot because it's gonna require this because Cooper Rush was able to win you a game last year. That was with I forget if Tyron Smith might have missed that game or not, but either way, that was with a much better offensive line and way better receivers. I believe Amari, CD were healthy. They had Ced Wilson.
Amari had his
Gallup
best game of the year with Cooper Rush.
Exactly. Gallup wasn't hurt yet. Like there's just I just, you barely got by with Cooper Rush last year for a game with way better offensive personnel around him. I'm not thrilled about the prospects of how Cooper Rush is going to do with whatever the hell they're running out at wide receiver right now. And that's the other thing. Like, you can maybe say, get Tolbert up to speed. If Jalen Tolbert isn't good enough to get reps and be active over the guys that were out there last night, yikes. Like, that's just that. I don't know if that's how big of an indictment that is on Tolbert because I really liked the draft pick. And I liked what I saw from him coming out of college, but I just it's a bad look that he was.
They were asking Tolbert to instantly become a weapon they can move around all over the place. That's what they were trying to do. They were like, Tolbert, you're taking Lamb's spot, right? Lamb, you're going outside. Tolbert, we want you to take Lamb's, run the slot, run the outside, and they even said they think they gave him too much. And you probably did. They do this all the time. A lot of teams do, where you give a guy and you're like, we're going to put him into, you have 3 roles. There is a huge jump from college to pro at any level.
Was it South Alabama?
Yeah, especially South Alabama, right? And so you're asking this guy who played at South Alabama to all of a sudden know all 3 positions in the pro level against pro defenses. Right? Know when to sit, know when to run, know when to cut your route off, know when to eat. All of these little things that make somebody like Amari Cooper so excellent as a route runner, right? So some of that may not be strictly on Tolbert's abilities. It may be he got overwhelmed. And look, we don't know that for sure. I'm going to assume that, but we don't know that. But you need more speed on the wide receiver, and you need it.
Yeah, and I know one thing I kept hearing throughout, the offseason program, OTAs, mini camps, and even in the training camp. One thing they really liked about Tolbert is he came in, he was a real confident guy, and they were trying to change the attitude and the toughness of the team, and he kind of had some of those traits. So I think the pick was more so on that side of things, more so than even the talent. And then once you get in, once you get him in here, and like you said, you start throwing the whole playbook at him and start telling him do this and that, and I can see where it becomes too much because he did not look comfortable out there in preseason at all. I mean, running across the middle, he seemed like he didn't really want any part of that, and catching the ball wasn't, a biggest strength for him. So I think he got a little bit overwhelmed. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and they just the guys that ran out there was just no element of speed, like you were saying, Dan. Like there's just no speed out there, and everything was rudimentary on the routes. It was just very basic, and you got to be creative. And you mentioned the rumors that the Jones kind of sent the call in to cut off the trick plays. I think we're confused. They were confusing creative offense for trick plays, just like based on how basic everything seemed. And you're not gonna. You're going to have to get creative to win with these guys that they're running out at receiver.
If you go back and look at the snap and pre-snap motion for 2021, the Cowboys were at the bottom of the league in both run and pass at the snap motion, right? Percentage-wise. Now, granted, look, the 49ers and the Rams were so far ahead of everybody. Like the 49ers were an aberration the opposite way. Like they were like motion almost like 70% of the time or something ridiculous, right? But the Cowboys were abysmal in motion. And we saw it early in the season. We saw some of it last year and we were like, oh, motion. Oh, this is going to be great. And as we saw the season go by, it just like disappeared. And, we saw them try it again to their credit, they did try some of that in this game. Partially because I think they knew they had to create space, right? I don't know if Kellen Moore is that guy. I don't know if he can do it. How many times in this last game, now granted some of this could have been receivers, did we see 2 routes in the same location? You should not
even a
be
bubble
seeing,
screen.
right. You're seeing, a tight end and your wide receiver in the exact same spot, right? You saw a couple times where your slot receiver and your outside receiver are within a yard of each other. Like that shouldn't be happening. So I don't know if that's a play design issue. I'd have to go back and look at all 22 and see how
If
it
you
goes.
remember, Kurt Warner did a whole production about this on his YouTube channel. I think it's called Kurt's Corner, where he was breaking down the route concepts of, I believe it was the playoff game against San Francisco. And he was basically calling out Kellen Moore for play design. It was like, well, you have this route combination. Well, this doesn't make any sense over here. But then you have Dalton Schultz backside, and he's not beating a corner one-on-one. So a lot of that is scheme, I would say.
And that's the question. So moving forward, how do you overcome all of this? And look, I'm not the biggest proponent of running, right? Like we have watched the trends in the league of run pass splits increase to passing more than running over the years, right? A decade ago, I want to say something ridiculous like 10 teams were around 55% or lower pass over run. Last year, only one team was at 50%, and that was the Eagles, right? So everybody else is starting to get in that 60% range. Most teams tend to be in that 57 to like 61% range. So I don't know. I'm not a huge proponent of just forcing runs, right? Like it's just not in this era. But to overcome what you have now, you're going to have to figure out how to just get all 3 of your running backs, not just Zeke, Pollard, Dowdle, whoever you want to put as your 3 or 4, even grab Davis. I don't care. Right. And you're going to have to use them, not just as a run, but pass as an extension of the run game. Little screens, bubble screens, as your point was, you're going to have to figure out ways to get them to create offense for you while you get your receivers potentially, hopefully up to speed. Outside of that I don't know without outside help how they can overcome their problems on offense. Now on defense, there were some issues. There were some really good things. This defense is really electric. I worry about pass rush. When you saw Micah not on the outside, Fowler was pretty much non-existent. Armstrong was pretty much non-existent, right? Sam Williams, like that side was, unless it was Micah, it was no one.
Yeah.
Right. You saw Tank getting pressure. You saw Tank stop that run. I worry a little bit about that run defense, and I worry a little bit about the pass rush. But overall, this defense can be really good. Unfortunately, it is not a defense like the 85 Bears that will carry the entire team. Yeah. That's an epic defense. I'm not trying to say it's just an absolute epic defense. So they're kind of here where you're going to have to run. You're going to have to pound that ball. You're going to have to hope that you can create plays in the run game and hope your defense can carry just enough to win some of those games.
Yeah, and they're going to need takeaway. They're going to need to get some of that takeaway magic back because Cooper Rush is going to need all the help he can get. As again, as we've harped on so much, how little help he's going to have already. I mean, Dak had almost no help, and now we have Cooper Rush in that same spot. So the defense is going to need to be special. And yeah, before we wrap this up, I did want to. We hadn't talked much at all. I don't think we mentioned it once. The defense. Micah Parsons is special. He's going to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation throughout the year. I believe he's already the favorite in Vegas if you go look at odds on whatever site. But because Parsons was awesome last night. He's about one of the only people on the team that showed up last night. But yeah, the issues with the run are very concerning because I think Bob Stern posted a graphic of Tampa Bay running to the left versus the right. They had almost no success running to the right, which is where Tank is.
They were stacking Parsons on him a lot too. So they were stacking, if you watched it, Tank and Parsons together to shut that side down. And so they were just running away from him.
And you know who was on the other side too?
Trevon Diggs.
Trevon Diggs. and he was backpedaling the entire way. He wanted no part of Leonard Fournette last night.
But
Yeah,
that is a target.
Diggs played really well as a corner, though.
yes.
Like I don't want to take it away.
Absolutely.
Like let's not nail Diggs too much, because that guy, 33 yards off of how often that defense was on the field and what was occurring on that field.
Absolutely.
I'll take it. Even though I don't love the fact that he wasn't mixing it in on the run, I will take the way he played as a cover.
In coverage, absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's just
like a game plan from Tampa Bay where it was like, hey, we're going to run away from Lawrence and we're going to go at Diggs in the run. And they did over and over and over. I think Fournette finished with like 130 yards, something like that. But
127, 6 yards a carry. Yep.
Yeah, it was not pretty in that. But other than that, like I was pretty happy with the defense. And, they really are going to need to lean on Parsons because he was the main bright spot. But maybe Barr and like Van Der Esch are going to give them some flexibility to play Parsons more at the edge, because I thought Van Der Esch was pretty decent last night.
Barr was not great in his snaps. He was not great. He was late on a lot of his plays. Now, granted, some of that's age, some of that's when he got to camp. Like, I think he will be better over the season. I do. But, like, he was late. And if that maintains itself, like, you're going to have to get Cox back up speed running, because he's got the speed that Barr does not have, right? I also worry about Kearse being out, right? Like, let's be really honest here. Either. Right? We didn't touch on it, but the other person who went down that no one's talking about that you potentially need on a rotation is Basham. Yeah. Basham went down holding his leg. Nobody has mentioned what's going on with Basham. And now, look, it may be a muscle issue.
I heard a thigh contusion.
A bone bruise, whatever you want to call it. But that could be a problem over a couple of games. So I think the defense is good. I don't have a problem with it, but there are some concerns, especially if injuries start mounting on that defense. But pass rush is going to be the issue without Micah. I think you're going to have to figure out, when we saw Gallimore and Hill on the field at the same time, you saw some push that you didn't really want in the run game, right? When you saw Osa on, notice the push wasn't there as much. So they're going to have to figure that out. But I think the defense is good. I think the defense is playoff worthy. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The problem's going to be is, can they sustain that over having to play if the offense cannot stay on the field?
That wears down any good defense, so that's tough.
One interesting note that I think Connor Livesay might have posted, isn't it weird that, the side of the ball, we always, everyone hates on Kellen Moore and everyone loves Dan Quinn and people are pretty split on Bones Fossil, but he pointed out, he's like, isn't it pretty interesting that, the coordinator, the one coach on this team that everyone praises for being creative and a smart play caller and good at his job, and there were no defensive penalties last night, I believe. Maybe one, but I think 8 of the penalties were on the offense, and
there were none.
And then maybe one on special teams. But yeah, the defense, I was pretty happy with last night. And, they gave up some yards, they gave up some plays, but they bowed their necks up when it mattered. And they got stops and they held Tampa Bay to, one touchdown. They only scored one touchdown. And
hey, they clamped in the red zone.
They were on the field the whole game because Dallas offensively couldn't sustain a single drive. So I was pretty happy with the defense. I know we spent most of our time here talking about, the offense and how atrocious it was, and rightfully so, because the defense, I think, held up their end of the bargain. If you would have told me we held Tampa Bay at 19 points, I would have said, great. Yes, great. They did their jobs, and they have a chance to be pretty good. Now, you mentioned the Kearse injury. Heard a lot of preseason hype about Marquise Bell and Izzy Mukwamu. Well, it's time to find out about that, because those are probably the guys that are going to slide into that role. Maybe we'll get a little bit more Donovan Wilson, who had an interception as well last night. But yeah, no, we're about to find out some of that safety depth that we've been so excited about, because that Jaron Kearse injury problem. He's a leader on the defense, and he's
a
really
smart
damn
player.
good at what he does.
He's a very smart player.
Very good player you want on your defense.
And there's one thing we also didn't touch on, and I don't know if this was Fossil. I don't know. But there were some questionable kick returns from Turpin where you were like,
Bad field
why
position.
are you running that out? Now, granted, this could have been Fossil saying, try to make something happen because our offense isn't doing it. Absolutely possible. And I am not going to take that, but it's something to watch. He got lit up on those returns.
That first one lit up.
Lit up. Right now, we knew this because of his size. Like, that's not a huge surprise that he was going to take hits due to his size. He's not a big guy, but that's something to watch going forward. Do they continue this pattern? Is it Turpin? Is it Fossil? Is it whatever? I think Turpin can. He has the speed. He has the thing to be a great kick returner. What's that going to look like? And what's the decision on bringing it out, not bringing out? Field position, because you're going to need that without Dak.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think part of that of him, because obviously Turpin had the 2 returns during the preseason game against the Chargers, and I saw some quotes in the media saying, my guys don't have to hold on blocks very long, and I'll get through there and I'm gonna be gone. And I heard C.J. Goodwin had a quote saying, what makes you so confident this special teams group can be, one of the best in the league, and it was a simple Turp. And I wonder just how much, if he was putting pressure on himself, even to where it's like, no, I got to make a play happen. I got to do this. I got to do that. Because like you mentioned, the first time he got lit up, and then there was another time where he got kind of swung around and thrown down. So I just want him to, you're going to have to be picking and choosing, like when you're taking some of this stuff out and not putting too much pressure on yourself, because the preseason returns were nice, but now this is regular season football. We got some real players out here now. So that is definitely a great point, and definitely something that we needed to mention on this show, and something to watch going forward.
Yeah, the other thing is, with Turpin, it's like, hey, if we're gonna give you this, if you're gonna take up a roster spot, we're gonna need some help in field position, because he's on the roster for that in the kick return game, and that's taking up a wide receiver spot that could be going to Jalen Tolbert, because we heard maybe Turpin's going to be involved in the offense as a receiver, and did he have any targets, and did he have any touches? I not that I can recall.
I know he was out there on a misdirection play, but he didn't get the ball.
Yeah, like if he's going to be out there, we're going to need something from him, because that's a roster spot that could be used on Jalen Tolbert, or just for the active roster on Sundays. So that was very under the radar, frustrating as well. You guys got anything else before we wrap this up? Are there any other awful notes that we needed to address? I think we kind of hit everything. We talked about the O-line, the receivers, the defense. I guess
I did want to talk about or go ahead.
I was gonna say.
No, I was just gonna say we didn't bring up the Tony Pollard pass blocking situation.
Yeah.
Where that was a big conversation, after the game and or actually during the game, and then after the game, and then this morning and today is that why Tony Pollard, hadn't been out there previous? I know a lot of people are, run blocking is not, or pass blocking is not important for a running back, and, it's kind of overrated, but I think we saw some of that last night play itself out, and it kind of cost the Cowboys on offense.
He really struggled in the pass game, and I saw Pollard's PFF pass blocking grade was like twice as good as Zeke's, which seems insane to me. I'm not like, oh, PFF's awful at what they do. They do good stuff, and I'm going to disagree with some grades sometimes. And
their issue with the grades is no one knows how it's actually done. No one, right? We've asked about Diggs. Like, they have Diggs as a lower grade than half the cornerbacks who gave up more yardage and more TDs yesterday, right? Like, there is no rhyme or reason to, and I think that's part of it. There's no transparency to the grades. So I don't put a lot into the grades. Now, I do put a lot into, hey, this person allowed X amount of pressures, or this person allowed, X amount of whatever yards per attempt, ANYA or whatever, right? Like, all of that I love. I don't like the grades as much because they're so subjective without a real answer of how you got here. They have told us if Diggs lines up across, let's say, Godwin, right, and he releases him to the safety and Godwin makes the catch, They have told us they put that on Diggs because he initially lined up across from him. They don't put it on the safety, even though he handed the wide receiver off to the safety. They hand it to the guy that he was lined up on. They say they cannot and do not take into account what the play call was because you just don't know. So there's a lot of question marks about this specific grades. So how Pollard is a better blocker, maybe because he got more chances at blocking. I don't know. What we do know is he was an issue in pass block. That we know. I don't think anybody watching that game would go, oh, yeah, he was really good pass blocking last night. He wasn't.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify about the grades, because the grades are one of those things. I do not love their grades. I love their data. I love the actual, like, that piece of it. But the actual grade itself is really questionable when no one can explain to you how they got it.
Yeah, I agree. He was clearly a problem in pass protect, and it wasn't just him. It was like probably some issues with communication up front. Maybe that's on Dak and Biotis to get the protection right. But yeah, it was clearly an issue. Farniok really, really struggled, and that's probably some of his first. I don't know how many snaps he had in a regular season game prior to yesterday, but I mean, he's dealing with Vita Vea, who Vita Vea was having a field day with Farniok, and Vita Vea will do that to you. Vita Vea is awesome at what he does. But yeah, like one of the other issues that the last thing I wanted to talk about was one of the issues that was very under the radar that we all kind of talked about and people kind of took it for granted, like, oh, Lyle Collins is gone, Terrence Steele is going to step in and be the right tackle. Kind of an underrated hypothetical going into the season that like seems to be maybe true is, what if Terrence Steele isn't good? Because I think his play last year got overrated a little bit just because they were winning when he was on the field, but like they weren't winning because of him necessarily. I like what he does in the run game. I'll say that, but he struggles in pass protect, and he had 4 penalties. I think 3 of them were on one drive, and Kellen kind of took a shot at him today. Kellen said, if you're gonna have pre-snap penalties, you can't be on the field. And I believe he had 3 false starts, and 2 of them were on the same drive. So, how urgent is the Terrence Steele conversation? And then we'll wrap this up.
It's been urgent, right? Like it's been urgent. And I mean, what do you have? A ball?
No.
Like,
yeah.
What do you have right now?
And that's
right?
the whole point. Yeah.
You didn't do anything. And look, I'd like to just kill the thing now. Thank you, Stevie J. I know you're out there. Let's kill the idea of a swing tackle, because you and I and everybody else who watches knows there is a huge difference between a right tackle and a left tackle in what they do. And this idea that any old tackle can play both positions has got to stop, right? Like, let's just squash that.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't, even if you believe it, they didn't really address swing tackle even, right? They were like, oh, we got ball and we got
let's go.
Well, let's go. And look, I like let's go. I think he can develop, but he's young. And just like we saw with Smith, you're going to have issues as people learn. At any position, anywhere, even the best players learn in their rookie years. That's how it works. So it's been an issue. And, he had a great game last year that people point to where they're like, what was it, Bosa or whoever he was up against. They're like, oh, look, that's great. But don't forget, you're lining up next to Zach Martin. And teams now have a season of tape of you as a right tackle. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to isolate you away from Zach Martin so that they can beat you, which we saw happen. Right? They were doing a lot of twists and stunts in the middle to force Zach to have to cover that, which left him on an island. We saw the results. So it's been an issue. Now, can he get there? I don't know. Maybe. I hope so. I mean, I think we all do.
With his work ethic, you just never know.
But, look, side note, Lyle Collins didn't have the best work ethic either. There was a lot of stuff people don't know going on behind the scenes.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to put it out there, but like I get why they let him go, and I totally support why they let him go. But by the same token, if that's the way you're going to go, you have to address the situation better than you did.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of the same thing with Amari, where it's like, if you want to let Amari go, if you want to let Lyle Collins go, I understand why, and I've heard and seen some of the same things you're intimating about Lyle, where it's just like, okay, let's do it, but like you're gonna need to do a little more to replace him, and at least you felt okay, I guess, about Terrence Steele. The way they've addressed the Amari thing in replacing him is a joke. But yes, Terrence Steele is definitely, I'm keeping an eye on this because he was not very good last night, and those pre-snap penalties are backbreaking, and it reared its ugly head last night. So, do you have anything on that, Corey? Do you have anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think you guys pretty much summed up the Terrence Steele situation. I mean, this is something that I said, throughout, when we were doing our position breakdowns, that I thought Terrence Steele had the most pressure on this offense coming into the season, because not only, because, this is before Tyron got hurt. So we knew that was coming at some point during the season. We didn't know how long he would be out. But then when you look at the right tackle situation and who's behind him, if he doesn't play well, who are you going to turn to? So that's kind of why I felt like, he had a lot of pressure coming into the season. And if that continues to go, and, Kellen Moore, I saw his quote today, and I understand what he's saying, but okay, Kellen Moore, go find his replacement if you're going to take him off the field. Like, how are you going to go about doing that? So I didn't put a whole lot of stock into that particular quote, just because I'm like, there's no one else behind him. So he's going to be out there making, his mistakes, and, just going to kind of have to live with it.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. So I guess before we get out of here, Dan, do you have tell us what you got going on? Tell us, what you're doing, and
Yeah.
your content.
Thank you. Yeah, I have an article actually coming out tomorrow about whether the Cowboys can right the ship and what some of the things they can do. That's on Fansided at Sport DFW. I have a podcast with VJA Massey, Podcast 4D. I also am doing some little stuff behind the scenes, helping some other content creators out. LP Cruz, who has some big news hopefully soon. Just trying to get some more content out there. But yeah, you can find me there, or of course you can find me on Twitter at the handle right there, Dan_Rupert.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Dan. This was a blast.
Thank you for your time.
I know it was a little long, but there was a lot to talk about. So we'll definitely be I'll definitely be bugging you in your DMs to make this happen again sometime.
Yeah, if you follow me, just know a lot of my stuff is very jokey sarcasm. I like if you follow me, just know that I'm not always 100% serious, even if I come across that way.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Make sure to check out everything going on at the Dallas Sports Fanatic on DallasSportsFanatic.com. Check out this podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos. All of that is very much appreciated. And make sure to check out myself at Nate_Sanch77 and Corey at the Mr. Douglas. And just like Dan, we're always firing our Cowboys thoughts into the void of Twitter. So thank you again for doing this, Dan. This was a blast. And we will talk to you next time on the Silver and Blue podcast.
Peace.